Hello, Heero here, and today we're gonna look at Cerydra, the short queen who supports her allies with double skill procs and buffs that enable big PP damage. I'll be discussing her kit, builds, lightcones, and possible teams. Just as a quick disclaimer though, the footage and information shown is from the creator experience server, so some things could still change when her banner drops. Let's start with her skill, Bronze Promotion, since it's pretty much the bread and butter of her kit. First of all, it grants military merit to one ally, which is indicated by a chess piece-like counter above a character's head, while giving Cerydra 1 point to charge every time you use her skill. Just note, you can only have one character with military merit, and you can change the unit who has it by targeting another character with her skill. But by doing so, it will reset her charge points back to 0. But speaking of which, Cerydra's charge points has a max of 8 points, with you gaining 1 every time the unit with military might uses a skill or basic, 1 from her A4 trace, 1 from Cerydra's skill, and finally 2 from her ult. But when you reach at least 6 points of charge, military merit gets converted to peerage, turning the chess piece orange while maintaining all the benefits from military merit and clearing any crowd control debuff on the ally that has it. Peerage buffs a character's skill crit damage by 72%, increases their all-type rest spend by 10%, but more important of all, it allows them to trigger Coup de Main, which is Cerydra's main selling point. Coup de Main essentially copies a character's skill, allowing you to use it 2 times in a row in 1 turn when the peerage buff is active. Just note this extra skill is completely free, meaning it won't consume any SP, buffs, or unit-related resources currently on the character. However, if the skill consumes effects on the enemy like the Herta's interpretation stacks, that will still get used up. Just note, once you trigger Coup de Main, it consumes 6 points of charge from Cerydra, causing peerage to revert back to military merit after the second skill. Meaning, the character sadly loses the 72% skill crit damage and 10% rest spend buff. Now let's go back to military merit since it also gives other benefits thanks to her talent. First of all, it provides an attack buff equal to 24% of Cerydra's attack, and the neat thing is, this does not have a cap. So the more attack she has, the higher her attack buff. And this goes in line with her A2 trace, which gives her a personal 18% crit damage buff for every 100 attack above 2000 with a max buff of 360%. Meaning you definitely want to build your focus on attack stats since you need 4k attack to maximize this trace, and thanks to her talent, this also gives a 960 attack buff to the character with military merit. Now going back to her talent, it also enables the character with military merit to generate charge points for Cerydra with her skill or basic. However, just note, the skill copied by Coup de Main will not generate charge points. Aside from this, whenever the character with military merit attacks, Cerydra will deal 1 instance of additional damage equal to 60% of her attack. This additional damage is pretty similar to Robin's in a sense that it can crit. However, you can only trigger it up to 20 times with the trigger count resetting after using her ult. Now her A6 trace also provides benefits for military merit, with it allowing her skill to provide 20 bonus points of speed to her and the unit with military merit for 3 turns. This puts her at 119 speed with her kit alone, while making it easier to reach speed breakpoints like 134 or 160 for her and your DPS. Just note, if you don't properly account for this speed buff while building your DPS, it can ruin speed tuning. And it's not a base speed buff, so it doesn't make Phainon's ult turns go faster. Whenever the unit with military might uses a skill or basic, it generates 5 energy for Cerydra thanks to this trace. Which is neat because combined with enemy hits, an ERR rope, and units like Anaxa who tends to spam skills, it allows Cerydra to get on average 2 to 3 turn ults. While in Phainon teams, it allows her to get her ult on average 1 to 2 turns after Phainon's transformation ends. This of course allows you to spam her ult very often, letting her abuse DDD to give her team more turns or take more advantage of her signature for far more SP. But speaking of her ultimate, Scholar's Mate, it's fairly simple. It's an AoE that scales off 240% of her attack, but more importantly, it gives 2 charge points to Cerydra every time you use it. And as much as possible, you want to take the measures to be able to spam her ult in order to proc her Coup de Main's double skill significantly more often, especially for non-Phainon teams. Now moving on to her A4 trace, it gives a 100% crit rate buff, making crit rate substats useless for her. And once per battle, Cerydra will gain 1 charge point after the unit with military merit uses their ult, as long as she's below 8 charge points. And finally, her technique, it gives the active character in the overworld military merit. Just note, switching characters will transfer it to the new active character. But in battle, it allows her to use her skill automatically without using SP to give military merit to the character who started battle. Now for ability Prio, level up her talent and skill first since that's where her buffs come from. After which level up her ult because you'll end up using it quite a bit. And finally, her basics.
With her kit out of the way, we can talk about her Eidolons.
Her E1 enables her military merit to give a 16% def ignore. And once it gets upgraded to peerage, the def ignore buff increases by 20% for a total of 36% when dealing skill damage. And it also allows Cerydra's skill to regen 2 energy to its target, which allows her to provide 2 core flames for Phainon with her skill, making it similar to Sunday and Tingun's ult, which is neat for fast and constant core flame generation. But the ironically funny thing is, it's only useful for Phainon since the 2 bonus energy is way too small, so it's pretty much negligible for any other unit who actually uses energy to ult. While her E2 allows military merit to provide a 40% damage buff, while buffing Cerydra's damage by 160% as long as a unit on field has it. These buffs are pretty much permanent, but the more important thing is that it allows Cerydra to contribute a more significant amount to the team's damage output. As for her E4, it permanently increases her ult's damage multiplier by 240%, which is pretty big, incentivizing you to use her ult more. And finally for her E6, allows military merit to give a 20% ult-type press pen buff both to the unit that has it and to Cerydra. Aside from this, it also increases the damage multiplier for additional damage by 300%. And now if you didn't notice, aside from some buffs to your DPS and her E1's utility for Phainon teams, her Eidolons are mostly focused on improving her damage output. So if you don't really care about her damage, aside from her E1, I don't really recommend going for Eidolons, especially if you're free to play. But instead, I recommend saving for future units or go for her S1 since it has better support utility for all of her teams, not just Phainon teams.
With her Eidolons out of the way, let's talk about Lightcones.
Cerydra's gorgeous signature increases her attack by 64%, allows her to regen 1 SP every time she uses an ult to attack, and enables her skill to give a 3-turn 64% skill damage buff for 3 turns. Overall, it's a fairly simple light cone, but it provides some good utility. Not only does it provide a good damage boosting effect to your DPS, it also makes it significantly easier to reach 4k attack with her. And due to Cerydra spamming so much ults, it makes SP management for teams like Archer or Anaxa co-ops so much easier. Its only caveat is that it's not as universal as Sunday's Light Cone for SP generation, since it requires an offensive ult to use, so realistically only Cerydra, Yukong, and Tribi can use it. Now her best free-to-play alternative is the new Forever Victual for a massive 80% attack buff, which of course makes it easier to get her to 4k attack in battle, while making her military merits attack buff way bigger. And I highly suggest getting it while you still can, since her other free-to-play option for Tomorrow's Journey doesn't provide as much attack. DDD of course is also another great option, with it allowing her to give her team so many turns due to Cerydra being able to spam her ult, especially in Anaxa or Archer teams. But for 5 stars, Robin's signature can work for bonus energy regen and attack for Cerydra. However, due to how short the duration of its attack and damage buff is, it's only really viable for Phainon teams. Just make sure to use her ult before Phainon's ult. And lastly, Sunday's signature is also decent for bonus energy for Cerydra, more SP generation, and up to a 45% damage buff for your DPS that she can easily maintain the uptime of by just using her skill. But if you have these two, you're most likely using them for Sunday and Robin, which are members of Cerydra's best teams. So if you're not going for her signature, I suggest just using Forever Victual or DDD instead.
But with her Lightcones out of the way, let's look at possible relics.
Sacredose is a really good set for her, giving her bonus speed to help her reach her breakpoints, while allowing her skill to provide up to a 32% crit damage buff at full stacks. However, this set only stacks twice, so if you're running her with a unit like Sunday, Bronya, or Sparkle who typically runs it, and is fully capable of stacking and maintaining this set's effects on their own, running it on Cerydra can become redundant. So with that being said, I really recommend just running her with the Eagle set. This is due to her being able to use her ult very often, which allows this set to get her more turns for either SP generation or charge point building with her skill, allowing you to trigger her coup de mate's double skill proc more often. And finally, any 2-piece combination of any attack or speed set can work if you're having trouble getting Eagle or Sacredose pieces with good stats. Just use whichever has the best substats and bonuses you need as temporary options. But for planar sets, any supportive energy regen set can work. Lashaka is a great generalist option for its attack buff for your DPS and bonus energy regen for Cerydra. Penacony is great if you're running her with Anaxa.
With her possible sets out of the way, let's talk about stats.
Looking at all her stats and traces, she has a decent 1358 base HP, 620 base attack, an energy cost of 130, and a low base speed of 99. With her traces giving her 18% attack, 22.4 bonus wind damage, and 10% bonus HP. Just note in battle, she gains up to 360% crit damage, and after using her skill, she also gets a flat 20 speed buff, putting her at 119 speed without speed boots. So make sure to consider all of that when building. For main stats, you want an attack chest, speed or attack boots, attack or ERR rope, and an attack orb. Now, as much as possible, you want to run attack main stats until she can reach 4k attack in battle. However, from testing, you can still run speed boots and then ERR rope with her free-to-play forever virtual light cone and still reach it. And it's a great option to do so, especially in Anaxa or Archer teams where Cerydra gets stacked more to get her ult faster or to have her generate more SP or charge points to proc coup de main more often. Which brings us to her substat priority. You want to focus on attack first, then speed, then flat attack. After which you can optionally get HP or defense for bulk to help her with her survivability when enemies hard focus her, especially in zero sustain comps, since she can be quite a bit squishy. Now, a minimum of 4000 attack in battle is needed to get her full crit damage buff, while allowing Cerydra to provide a 960 attack buff. But you can get more attack since the attack scaling on her attack buff doesn't really have a cap. But I would only suggest doing so after meeting her speed requirements, and there are two options you can go for. The first, of course, is a standard 134 in battle, which is recommended if you're having trouble getting near 4000 attack or speed substats. It's a much easier speed goal to achieve, since her speed buff without speed substats or boots puts her at 119 speed, so you only need 15 speed from substats. And the second is 160 speed, which in my opinion is the better option since it allows her to generate more SP with basics or charge points with her skill more often, while also allowing you to get her ult faster to generate even more charge and simultaneously letting her take more advantage of her signature's bonus SP generation or spam DDD's action advance. But the neat thing is, you also don't need too much speed substats to reach this. With just her buff and speed boots alone, it puts her at 144 speed. You only need 16 speed from substats to reach 160.
But with her build out of the way, let's move on to possible teammates.
Now, the best DPS she currently supports is Phainon, with her bringing quite a bit of benefits for our delivery boy and his teams. The most important of which is the double skill procs, which has two benefits, one for each form. For his normal form, the double skills allows him to occasionally generate 4 core flames in one turn, essentially providing similar benefits of an action advancer for core flame generation, but only consuming 1 SP instead of 3. This is on top of her fast speed, allowing her to spam her skills to generate even more core flames and charge points. However, this does make her quite SP hungry if you use her skill every turn. But the most important benefit is that Cerydra allows his transformed state to perform double meteors, which doubles the damage output of his most damaging ability, especially when you consider all the offensive buffs she gives him. From testing, you can perform up to 2 double meteors for Phainon ult, as long as you use his ult when Cerydra has at least 6 charge points. And this is all on top of Cerydra enabling Phainon to be ran with a -1 speed setup without speed boots, since her 20 speed buff puts him at 119 speed without his signature and 131 with his signature. But just note, her speed buff is not a base speed buff, so it will not make Phainon's extra turns go faster. Now for teams, Cerydra will take the place of one of the 3 supports in a Phainon's Stainless team, the best variation being Phainon, Sunday, Cerydra, and Robin or Bronya. However, if you don't have Sunday, some good replacements are Sparkle, Bronya, or even Tingyun, and if you don't have Robin, options like 3B, Cypher, the RMC, Ruan Mei, and even Yukong are all pretty good options. Just note, however, depending on which support you use, it can cause SP issues, so things that generate SP like Sundays, Bronyas, or Cerydra's Lightcones would be a great help. But moving on, the next DPS Cerydra best supports is Anaxa. Her coup de main's double skill procs enables him to launch 4 skills in a row, which provides a lot of benefits for both Anaxa and Cerydra herself. Aside from significantly increasing Anaxa's damage output, it also allows him to almost get his ult back even without an ERR rope at 0 energy with just one 4 skill instance, which enables one turn Anaxa ults to be used more frequently. Granted, he does need to get hit at least once. But this allows you to not worry about the ramp up for his weakness implants, while also allowing you to take more advantage of the Eagle Set's action advance to get more turns to generate charge points for Cerydra. Now speaking of which, his double skill procs also generate Cerydra's charge points super fast, allowing you to get her peerage buff more often, resulting in more quadruple Anaxa skills. But aside from this, it also ends up generating so much energy for Cerydra that she can spam her ult very often, allowing her to abuse DDD for more team turns or her signature for more SP, which of course enables her to generate even more charge points, or you guessed it, even more Anaxa skills. All of this is without even considering that you can also run an action advancer to result, and you guessed it, even more Anaxa skills. And of course, her speed buff also allows him to reach speed thresholds like 134 with attack boots or 160 speed with the Eagle Set so much easier. However, this combo can cause SP management issues since you want to be using Anaxa and Cerydra's skills as much as possible to build charge points and maintain uptime on Cerydra's speed buff. And there's also the issue of Cerydra's peerage buff only being applied to Anaxa's first double skill, meaning only 2 out of the 4 skills will get Cerydra's skill crit damage and rest band buff. Now the best team variation I found is one with Anaxa, Cerydra, Sunday, and a sustain of your choice. But if you don't have Sunday, action advancers like Bronya or Sparkle, or supports like Rowan May, Robin, 3B, Silverwolf, Cypher, the RMC, and more can all work. However, if you're feeling brave and the content allows for it, you can always run a sustainless Anaxa team with Cerydra and 2 other supports to enable Anaxa's damage even more. But moving on, he also works with Archer since his main damage source is skills. Cerydra's double skill proc either allows Archer to perform 5 skills in a row so much easier, or completely bypass his 5 skill limit, allowing him to perform 6 skills in a row with no extra SP cost. And due to how Archer works, his skill spam also provides a decent amount of ult energy to Cerydra, while being able to almost generate the 6 needed charge points to trigger coup de main on his own. This lets you play her in a much more SP positive playstyle to help generate SP for Archer with basics and her ult if you have her signature. Plus, he really appreciates her big attack buff due to the lack of it in his teams. However, there are some issues with this pairing that you have to consider. Due to how his skill and Cerydra's peerage buff works, only 2 out of the 6 possible Archer skills will get her 72% crit damage and 10% rest pen buff from peerage. Which of course is not too ideal, since Archer deals damage through consecutive skill procs and not one giant scale damage nuke. So unlike other supports like 3B, Cypher, and Silverwolf, Cerydra isn't able to fully buff all of Archer's skill spam, resulting in lower overall damage. Second, her speed buff isn't too ideal for Archer since he does want to act slow in order to give your team enough turns to build SP, especially if you don't have Sparkle. However, this does not mean Cerydra is a bad support for Archer. Like I said, her SP positivity in Archer teams, attack buff, and double skill procs still benefit him. And she is a really good third support in a sustainless Archer team, wherein all of Archer's skill spam gets buffed by your other supports, while you still get Cerydra's bonus skill proc and SP positivity. But with that being said, the best Cerydra plus Archer team consists of course of Sparkle and a sustain of your choice, with Gallagher being preferred for SP generation. However, if you don't have Sparkle, Tingyun with Sunday's Lightcone, the Eagle Set, and 160 speed, or a Hanya can work as great alternative options. And as usual, if you're feeling brave, you can always just go sustainless and use a third support, with the best being Silverwolf to take more advantage of the Genius set, but units like 3B, Rowan Maid, the RMC, and Cypher are good as well. But now, what about other units? Well, she's not really the best support for them, but she is a potential option for certain ones if you have no one else. For example, Zeta, if she ever gets buffed, will benefit a lot from Cerydra being able to duplicate her buff skill during her resurgent state. Plus, her extra turn mechanic does help generate charge points for Cerydra much faster. However, there is an issue where her copied resurgent skill will target random enemies if there are multiple enemies on field, due to resurgence requiring a kill to activate. There's also the Herta benefiting a lot from having her skill duplicated for faster interpretation stack and alt energy building, or having her enhanced skill duplicated for extra damage. However, just note, the first enhanced skill from the Herta will consume all interpretation stacks on an enemy, meaning the duplicated skill will deal significantly less damage. So running an E1 Herta is really recommended for more consistent damage if you really want to use her with Cerydra. And there's also the issue of Herta teams being duo DPS comps, where the second DPS usually provides a considerable amount of damage. And since Cerydra is a single target buffer, she ends up hurting the overall team damage output. Now that's about it, which just leaves one last question.
Is she a must pull?
Well, that depends on if you have Anaxa or Phainon. If you have both of them, Cerydra is able to massively improve their performance in just about any endgame content, which potentially increases their shelf life, especially once the 4.x patches arrive. And side note, it's very funny watching Anaxa spam his skill over and over again. Now for Archer, well, I would only really roll Cerydra for him if you're lacking a secondary support like Silverwolf or Cypher. Unfortunately, Cerydra is really only an alternative to them and can't be a replacement to Sparkle. But she still does a decent job in improving Archer's performance. But with that being said, Silverwolf is rerunning on the same phase, so if you're specifically looking for an Archer support, I would recommend rolling for her instead. Now, if you don't have Anaxa or Phainon and are not looking for an Archer support, I can't really recommend rolling for Cerydra right now. As she stands right now, she's a bit niche. Aside from the three I just mentioned, not a lot of units really benefit too much from her overall kit. So in this case, it's much more recommended to roll for another character you like or need to improve your account, especially if you're free to play. However, there is always the possibility that Hoyo will release more skill damage oriented units that can fully utilize Cerydra's strong but niche kit in the future. So if you want to channel your inner Aventurine, you can go all in and take the gamble to prepare for them, or wait for her rerun to see if she gets more synergies. But saving is also never a bad idea. Remember, units like Evernight, Dunhung, and Cyrene are still coming, and 4.x is in less than half a year. Personally, I'm gonna have to pass on Cerydra because I want to save for Evernight, and Hysolence made me dead broke with a lost 50-50 and I still don't have her. Please end my suffering! But anyway, make sure to tell me what you think about her in the comments below, and don't forget to hit me with a like and a sub. Now, onto the showcases, and remember, I really suck at this game.